Hello and welcome to the Rabblecast. My name is Eric Hernandez, and you are listening to episode 609. Get ready for this one. Doug is back once again, thankfully. Uh, uh, and I cannot even mention all of the different things that we go over. We talk about movies, we talk about comics, we talk about music, and we delve into a little Fast X or Fast 10. I was kind of hoping that Doug can give me some of his feedback, and we do talk about certain aspects of the Fast franchise. So I'm not going to delay any further. There's a lot to go over in this episode, so I hope you enjoy. I hope you have fun. We are brought to you by InsidePulse.com. You can find us over at Rabblecast.libsyn.com. You can also check us out on our YouTube channel. I post up the audio only. Who knows if video is ever be a thing for us. We'll see what happens. You can follow us on the Facebook fan page, send us a tweet at Rabblecast, and email us, rabblecast@gmail.com. Like I said, there's a lot in this one, so I don't want to delay any further. Enjoy it, listen in, have fun. And, the one thing I will delay for, call to action. If you are listening to this show, if you're on Apple Podcasts, subscribe to the show. If you're on YouTube, leave a like, subscribe, leave a comment, email us. We want feedback. The more feedback, the better. And the one thing I will mention, because I forgot to mention it during the show, we were talking about DC, the DC Extended Universe, and James Gunn and his partner, and for whatever reason, these days, I'm starting to lose certain names when I get pressured. So, it's David Safran. I have it right here. It was Peter Safran. I hope I'm saying that correctly. Was his partner for the DCEU. So there you go. Don't email me. Email me, but not about that. You know what I mean. Enjoy the show. I think we're set.
Okay.
How you doing? How's your week been since we last spoke?
Pretty good. Took Friday off. Had a long weekend. Yeah, not too bad. Things are moving, things are grooving, things are doing. How about you?
Nice. Yeah, same thing actually. 3-day weekend. Things are kind of slow at the lab right now, so our boss is taken upon herself to say, hey, look, since we're slow right now, have an extra day off. She's willing to pay us for that extra day off, which is nice. So we get to spend a little extra time at home, a little extra time with our families, and took advantage of it. Got a bunch of stuff done this weekend. So, and also had a chance to catch Fast 10.
Gotcha.
Which was earlier in the day. I was asking by chance had you caught it yet, because I was kind of hoping we could geek out and nerd out about it, but I don't think you had a chance to catch it, correct?
Correct. I have not seen it.
Is it one that you're going to watch in the theaters, or are you just going to wait until it comes home?
I've had a very difficult time consuming new material lately.
How so?
It takes a certain amount of energy to watch new stuff, and I haven't really had that energy lately.
Just not into it, or?
Well, no, there's been a bunch of new stuff that I've just kind of been, how can I describe this? To watch something new, you got to pay attention to it. You got to really, absorb it, right?
Yeah, you have to invest time into it.
Yeah, I haven't had that lately.
Okay.
I've been having a bit of a time with that, so I have barely watched anything new as of late. Yeah, I've just been watching stuff I've already seen because it's easily digestible because I've seen it, so I know what the hell's going to happen.
Okay. Do you have a list of anything that you're looking forward to, or things that you're that are on the back burner that you're looking forward to catching up with?
Fast 10 I'll watch at some point. Renfield I want to watch. The fuck was that last fucking thing? Guardians 3 I gotta watch eventually.
Okay.
But I've been in no. Are we recording?
Yes, we are.
Okay, you gotta tell me these things are cowboy.
Well, I figured it would be like just like the old times. We'd sit down, and as soon as we sat, I hit the record button, and you were like, "Are we recording?" Yes, yes, we have been.
Okay. Yeah. The what the hell was I gonna say? Fuck. Um,
You had mentioned Guardians.
yeah, Guardians 3. I'll probably watch that eventually, even though I've kind of been like relatively unenthused with the Marvel Cinematic Universe as of late. I think I've rambled about that previously. Uh, the yeah, I tried watching like the new Ant-Man movie that came out. I think it was back in February,
Yes.
and God, it took me 2 or 3 sittings to get through it.
Any particular reason, or?
Yeah, I just stopped paying attention a couple of times, and I was like, I
Oh,
just
okay.
don't fucking care right now.
Fair enough.
So, but that the Marvel Cinematic Universe, minus a few of the like one-off TV shows, has pretty much become like the very definition of shit. I if they just ended it after Endgame, I would have been totally cool with that.
I think a lot of the fandom would have been very cool with that as well.
Yeah, 'cause I'm struggling to think of anything I've seen that I really enjoyed since Endgame. Um, Thor: Love and Thunder, I was like, whatever. The second Doctor Strange, Multiverse of Madness, I was like, whatever. Um, Even the shows, like WandaVision was okay. I'm probably gonna watch. I probably watched it once. I'll probably never watch it again. Uh, Falcon and Winter Soldier, I watched it once. I'll probably never watch it again. Same thing with oh, what the hell was the other one? Loki. Yeah, I was
Okay.
just like, this is great. I just don't give a shit. Uh, Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was hoping that all the shows. Don't get me wrong. I'm a big Marvel fan through and through. So I was hoping the shows hit a little bit differently overall. But looking
Hmm.
back on them in hindsight now, yeah, they're fun. But you're right. There's not much to go back to and watch again. Like it's just more set up for other stuff. So by the time the show's over, it's already like hopefully setting up for the next thing. Like WandaVision follows into Doctor Strange and Multiverse of Madness. Loki more or less flows into Quantumania because of the whole storyline with He Who Remains, who ends up being Kang. Um, I don't know. They feel weird now, especially Falcon and the Winter Soldier. That one was plagued by reshoots and rewrites because of the pandemic and everything else. Apparently, there was a storyline in that show where they had like some kind of virus that gets released, and they had to rewrite it. Like, oh no, this one's hitting a little too close to home, so they had to do some new drafts on that one. So it's kind of weird, but yeah, I can see. Watch them once, and then you're just like, okay, that was fun. But what what more is there? I don't think. I think at this point, WandaVision is not coming back for season 2, from what they're saying. Loki is definitely coming back, and you're going to have a new Captain America movie with Falcon wearing the new Captain America suit. So that's kind of a continuation of that. I doubt we're going to get another Falcon and Winter Soldier movie or TV show on Disney Plus. But yeah, again, even as a Marvel fan, Quantumania itself, watching that one was okay. But here's a fun one for you. I don't know if you heard.
Shoot. What's up?
So the ending of Quantumania was different for the test audiences.
Really?
So apparently, what had happened was during the test audiences, because people love to put the movie out ahead of time to see what fan reactions are going to be, or at least normal people everyday reactions are going to be. And
Hmm.
the ending of the movie originally had Ant-Man and the Wasp being trapped in the Quantumverse, or whichever quantum world, and it was like a bleak ending. Like they were going to be stuck there, and the idea was eventually they're going to have to figure out how to get them out. But it didn't play too well with the test audiences, so they had to go back and reshoot, and that's where they did the happy ending, where they get them out at the very end. There was like no sacrifice, no real like big drama after that, and you're just like, oh, okay, they got out, they win, happy ending, yay. Had they left it open ended, it would have been nice to like go further in and have both Ant-Man and Wasp being trapped in the quantum verse and just trying to figure out how to get out again. It just, I don't know. It felt like that would have been the big sacrifice, because the big line during the trailer was, "I don't have to win. We just both have to lose." It's like, oh, somebody might die in this, but it didn't play out that way at all.
Yeah, and that was another example of it just didn't feel. Uh, it just didn't feel fun to me, if that makes sense.
There was a lot of elements that were missing from the first two movies.
Yeah.
More specifically, his ex-convict friends, the what they refer to them as the Wombats, Michael Pena and the other two guys.
Oh, which is funny because one of them was that dude who is now the polka dot jerk off from that fucking Squad movie.
Yes, and I believe David Desmalchin is his name.
Yeah, that guy.
I mean, it's great to see him finally getting roles where he's speaking. Usually you just see him like as an extra or background character. I remember him from the Chris Nolan movies for Batman. He's the one cop that gets caught during when they try to assassinate the commissioner.
Yeah, you know what? It was funny because I was watching. I can't remember what I was watching a couple of years ago. Whatever movie he showed up in, and I was like, "Man, this guy looks familiar." And I looked him up, and I was like, "Oh God, this guy's been around for years."
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's friggin' weird.
Yeah, he's been paying his dues quite a bit, and now to see him in different roles. So not only was he one of the Wombats, he was, what was the one you just referenced? Suicide Squad.
Oh, yeah, the James Gunn Suicide Squad from I think that was like 2 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the one that basically was a kickoff for Preacher, or not Preacher, Peacemaker.
Yes. And he also, funny enough, appears in, well, it doesn't appear, but his voice you hear in Quantumania. He's the jelly character that is like wants holes. At the very end, they shoot him full of holes, and then he like pulls a Kirby and eats everybody.
Oh, really? That was him?
That was him as well.
Oh, no kidding. Oh.
So,
Oh, that's wild.
at least he got a chance to be in the movie in some shape or form, but the other two guys got left out. I think it was kind of hard to write in Michael Pena at that point, and I'm not entirely sure where Marvel and Disney stand with Ti, because apparently he had some weird like news pop up. He was like very stringent about how his daughter dates or whatever the case is, and he said he'd be willing to do certain things to certain people if she was mistreated, and people are like, whoa, slow down, like you can't say that, at least not when you're part of the Disney world, because they don't take too kindly to some shit. So I don't know if that affected his casting in the third movie at all, but again, they had to like shift gears a little bit, and it didn't really pan out the way they wanted it to. I don't know. Quantumania just felt different. It definitely, like you said, it missed a few beats from the previous movies. Now I'm hearing that Chris Hemsworth even came out about Thor Ragnarok, or not Ragnarok, Love and Thunder, saying that maybe there was a little bit too much comedy and they should have done things a little differently. So,
yeah, that was for in this point in time, the mark for me for a good Marvel movie is something I want to watch more than once, and they haven't made anything I've wanted to watch more than once since they wrapped up the Infinity Stone storyline. Like every one of these movies has been so disposable to me that I'm going to watch it in, if I get through it in one sitting, I'm probably going to have zero desire to go back and watch it. Like, that's how it was with all the ones I mentioned. That's how it was with the Black Widow standalone. Yep, pretty much that's how it was with the TV shows. It was just one of those things where I was like, that was fine, but they've become a very much disposable entertainment to me.
I feel bad for the Black Widow movie. That one not only was long overdue and kind of like too little too late, but also to be released in the pandemic. It just got screwed on pretty much every end.
Yeah, and that part I can't fault them for it. But I mean, it's funny too because unfortunately the pandemic is going to become one of the big cultural touchstones of our lives because of how everything went, and we're still figuring out the repercussions for it. We're still feeling the repercussions for it. I mean, hell, people forget we're still in a pandemic, just because most people have decided it doesn't exist anymore because they don't want to deal with it. But people with immune issues and health issues are still basically dealing with it day to day. It's not uncommon for me. Like, I still try to mask up when I go out, especially to the grocery store, as much as I can. And I maybe every 1 out of 20 people will be wearing a mask at grocery stores,
Hmm.
and I get it for most people. It's we're at the point now, and I'm trying not to go down to too many rabbit holes at this point. But and something about the pandemic, it kind of and entertainment now feels like pre-pandemic and post-pandemic for me. So unfortunately, a lot of the stuff that came out after the pandemic hit, like especially that first couple of months in 2020, that was all stuff that we're still close enough to it, and I'm still picking up the pieces of it emotionally and mentally for myself that I don't want to be reminded of it. So I think that is also one of the things that colors a lot of new material for me as well,
Okay.
if that makes any sense whatsoever.
No, it definitely does. Yeah, like we were talking about last time, we can remember things from like 2015 very clearly, but the stuff that happened in the pandemic, it just seems like, oh yeah, that came out, or this was released, or that was looked over, whatever the case was. For me, it's still a little weird when I watch certain movies or TV shows and you still see a gathering of people,
Yeah.
because it's just like, oh no, somebody can get sick. That's something that's gonna have to go away over time, I guess. But that was the big thing, is how do you write a lot of these scenarios now? Again, I mentioned Falcon and Winter Soldier when they had that one storyline. I don't know if it was a subplot or the main storyline of that, but they had to switch things up a little bit because they couldn't have anything that was hitting too close to home, or too close to current events, because they just felt it would rub people the wrong way. But yeah, definitely, like the way that everything hit at that point, it's still seen like in a weird light in a sense, and you kind of like, you can put it to the beginning of the pandemic. I guess things in the beginning of the pandemic are a little bit more clearer in focus, but
Hmm.
in those 2-3 years since, it's just kind of odd what has come out and what you had to deal with at that point. I remember when that movie was released, because that was the day and date release in the theaters and on Disney Plus. And at the time, we were fortunate enough that Jen's father had a little home theater in his basement, so we were fortunate enough to go to his place and watch it and just sign up on our friend's account and just enjoy it that way. But all the disputes that came up after that, where actors were saying like, well, look, I get a certain amount of bonuses or milestones depending on how it does in the theater. What does that mean if you guys are going to release it on streaming? That kind of screws me out of a lot of stuff. And that's what led to the lawsuit between Scarlett Johansson and Disney. And for a little bit, it was just kind of like, oh, now both sides are going to play dirty for a little bit. But eventually, they ended up settling with her because they didn't want to set a precedent. And people were like, all right, let's just make this go away. Movie's already done. Again, I say it got screwed on multiple ends only because having that come out so far after not only the Avengers, but also after the Infinity War movies, it was kind of like, oh, we're having a flashback now, but there's no stakes as far as the Black Widow is concerned, because she makes it through.
Yeah.
So it's just like, what am I watching?
Yeah. I mean, it was, yeah. And like the phrase you used is perfect. Too little, too late. If they put together a movie dealing with her like that in maybe, if we got something like that around 2015, 2016,
Mm,
I think it would have fit in a hell of a lot better. Since
absolutely.
that could be an interesting way of, I'm trying to think like, well, I mean, in the storyline of Black Widow, if I remember correctly, everything took place. What was it? It was around the time she was AWOL with Captain America after Civil War, right?
Yes, not Civil War. Winter Soldier.
Oh, it happened in between
Did
Winter
it?
Soldier and Civil War.
Oh, hold on, wait. No, you're right. It was Civil War. Because at that point they leave and then they pop up in the beginning of Infinity War, and Cap's got his colorless suit, and she's sporting the blonde hair that's kind of like fading at that point. But yes, you're right. After Civil War.
Okay. Yeah, because I remember. Yeah, because I remember it was like, yeah, it was supposed to be. I want to say now that I'm thinking about it, I remember like reading somewhere it's like the movie's supposed to be set in like 2017, 2018. I was like, okay, that would make sense because everything was kind of in turmoil at that point in terms of, the entire Avengers team after Civil War like split them up so they could be divided, so they could give Thanos the win, so then they can get back together and be victorious in Endgame. So yeah, but having to go backwards like that, it's like, okay, we clearly know there are no stakes. There are no stakes because we already know what movie she's going to show up in, and it just felt like it's like, oh, this is going to be finally we're getting to the vanity point, just a little bit too late. And why is David Harbour here other than he's a hot actor because of Stranger Things?
Mm-hmm.
And and it's like, okay, Florence Pugh. I'm pretty sure they're going to do something coming up in the near future where Florence Pugh, after she gets done fighting with everybody and bullshitting around, they'll probably flip her around and she'll be like the new Black Widow for the team or whatever the fuck or something like that. And it's like, Jesus fucking Christ. Like, but then again, this is, when you're working with comic book material, this is what they do in comics, right?
Yes, very much so.
Like, nobody ever dies. And if you do happen to die somehow, we're going to just make an analog for you so we have a different character in the same position.
Well, that was the weird thing about after Endgame, especially because you give up your some of your big characters. So you no longer have Captain America. Chris Evans is gone. Iron Man is gone. Spoilers, he's dead. At this point, and some of the other characters have like fallen by the wayside. So it's what do you do going forward? You've lost a lot of your heavy hitters, your marquee characters. Them trying to build up the next phase, the movies that follow up afterwards, like you really have to put a lot of work in to make sure these other characters become established so that people will have more investment into them emotionally, that they'll want to watch them. Shang-Chi was a fun movie. Has like probably one of my favorite openings ever when they tell the story between his mother and his father first meeting and having that fight back and forth and how they fell in love. That movie's fantastic. Is it very cliche in certain regards as far as like the beats of the movie? Absolutely. But it was fun to see that character finally brought to the big screen. Black Panther.
Wait, which movie?
Shang-Chi.
Oh, gotcha.
And Legend of the Ten Rings. But even now that I say that, even going back to even that far, with the Legend of the Ten Rings, that was supposed to be something that was part of the Mandarin. And that character kind of got, futzed with as far as Marvel's concerned, because you had the fake version of the Mandarin, played by Sir Ben Kingsley, and then you find out that he's not the actual Mandarin. He was just some actor hired to be the face of, an actor playing him on TV, essentially, for the actual terrorists. And then you find out later on that Shang-Chi's father has the Ten Rings, but he's not, like, there's no Iron Man for him to face off against. Mandarin was originally an Iron Man villain, so that was kind of like, all right, we've lost the matchup there. And then you have the passing of Chadwick Boseman. You lost that Black Panther. I mean, granted, we have another one in Wakanda Forever and his sister, which is great, but like, you miss the storyline now because they have yet to introduce the X-Men. Storm and Black Panther at one point got married in the comics. That would have been a great story to tell on the big screen, but there's another one that you've kind of missed out on, unfortunately. So yeah, a lot of the comic book stuff, it's a lot of moving pieces that they have to try to coordinate. But even, it's funny because you were talking about the timeline. There's a lot of people, even internally for Disney and Marvel Studios, that are disputing now how the timeline is working out, where certain movies take place. Yeah, because they have a jumbled mess now. The Russos did a smart thing, doing like they time jumped the 5 years into the future, but even then, by undoing the snap in Endgame and anything that came after it that had to incorporate that into it. So like in WandaVision, when people were brought back, the one scene where Monica Rambeau's in the hospital and everybody's running around like crazy because people who disappeared years earlier suddenly reappeared. Like that kind of chaos. How do you write into that one? Spider-Man's Far From Home same thing. Like some of the students were older, some of the students were younger. It was just like, it just seems like more of a headache than it's really worth. So I don't know exactly how they plan on solving that issue, but it definitely threw a monkey wrench into a lot of different storylines. Not to mention that if something got delayed and it's supposed to take place at a certain time in the timeline, then you're kind of effed on that one as well. Same thing with like the Eternals. Like why didn't the Eternals help the Avengers when Thanos came to Earth? Like they were there, they easily could have done something, but they're like, oh, it's not our thing to stand into the battles of men, whatever the case is. Blah blah blah. And now I'm hearing, I think I mentioned a few episodes back, because of the writer's strike, Blade has also been delayed at this point. So,
Oh, really?
yeah, Blade lost their director back in November, I believe, and they were kind of
Okay.
scrambling to get somebody else in. Masahiro Ali was getting frustrated, and then now the writer's strike, things are going to get delayed even further, and there's rumors that he might be out as Blade himself.
Oh, geez.
So they might have to go searching for another one. And who knows? Maybe at this point, maybe they might go back and knock on Wesley Snipes' door saying, hey, look, we lost our marquee character, or our marquee actor for this character. Would you be willing to put the fangs back on? Who knows? It's supposed to be timeless, you know?
He said he would come back and do it. He just looks a little older than he did when they made the, Blade in 1997. So I don't know what to tell you.
Well, look, they can do the de-aging stuff. They can make him look a little bit younger. They can actually make him open his eyes this time around, not like last time. You heard that story, right?
What?
I think it was on Blade 2 or 3. I can't remember when he was like becoming so horrible to work with. There's a scene where he was in a interrogation room, or he was laying on a bed on a operating table, and the scene called for him to open his eyes, and he refused to play along with the scene. So they actually used CG to open his eyes, and it looks horrible if you go back and look at it.
Oh, wow. I enjoyed the first one quite a bit. Um, I know I've seen 2 and 3, but those were movies that I just watched once, and I was like, all right, I'm cool, I'm moving on. So I never went back and rewatched any of those.
The first
Especially
one,
there's something about Blade. Go ahead.
I would say, the first one is definitely the birth of the MCU, essentially. If it wasn't for Blade's success, we wouldn't have had the other movies that followed afterwards. At least they would have come in varying degrees, because it was Blade and then the X-Men movies and then Spider-Man and everything else. But first one always holds a certain place in my heart, especially for that opening scene where they're at the bloodbath, the club scene.
Oh, yeah, that's 16.
And then the second one was directed by Guillermo del Toro. And you also have the Blood Pack, which is all the other vampires that team up with Blade. And you have Ron Perlman just being his asshole self the entire time.
Oh, yeah.
Which is priceless. And then you also have a very young Norman Reedus playing Blade's sidekick at the time, which is kind of weird to go back and see how young he looks now.
It was weird because I remember watching Blade 2 and being like, oh, there's the dude from the Boondock Saints in it.
Yep.
Do you know what Boondock Saints is?
Absolutely. Sorry, I was taking a drink of water.
Okay. Oh, okay. I'm sorry. And this is the one downside, folks, of doing the recording this way. You don't know when the person just kind of zones out for a second or whatever, because we're not actually seeing each other. We're just I have my phone propped up on my chest right now, and I'm laying on my couch watching Terminator 2 with the sound off. So
okay. But yes, I do absolutely. I'm familiar with the Boondock Saints, and yes, that was another one. I don't think I'd seen it at that point yet when Blade 2 came out, but
gotcha.
Definitely was one of those late night watches that I caught up with eventually. Yeah, no, it's cool to see him advance so far at this point in his career, because his character of Daryl, or Durrell, depending on how you pronounce it, was not even part of the original comic. He was actually created for the TV show. So the fact that his character was able to take off as well as it did with the fans, I mean, at that point, he just launched himself.
The big thing I'm still hot about involving Norman Reedus was back in, oh God almighty, 2013, 2014, 2015, something like that. A game demo popped up on PlayStation. It was just called PT.
Yes.
And then a few people downloaded it, and all of a sudden word of mouth got around, which is what I think they planned on it. And all of a sudden it turns out it's like, Yeah, we put it out under a weird name, but congratulations, you just found the demo for the new Silent Hill game, which
Hmm.
would have been called Silent Hills, and Norman Reedus is in it. And a lot of us were collectively like, "Oh fuck, this is going to be so fucking sweet." And then out of nowhere, Konami was like, "Yeah, we don't like making money, so we're just going to cancel this. Never mind."
I remember that one because I didn't have a PlayStation at the time, but our friend Dan came over with his PlayStation and he already had downloaded the demo.
Yeah,
So he had it because this is before they eventually pulled it from the store, so you could no longer get your hands on it.
yeah.
And he brought it over, and for a couple hours, we just futz around with it. And eventually, I figured out how to quote unquote beat the demo, or at least get past a certain story point in the demo. And then it gave
Uh-huh.
you that cutscene where the character is walking down the street, and when he looks over his shoulder, you see Norman Reedus' face. And yeah, and the demo itself was fantastic. Like I could have easily fallen in love with a game like that. But unfortunately, like you said, Konami was like, no, no, no. For whatever reason, they just were not, you know, looking forward to that project in particular. And that's when they were making like a bunch of weird, questionable decisions as far as their franchises were concerned. So the fact that fell apart, but then he popped up, and what was the other game? Uh, oh god, there was a Hideo Kojima game, Death Stranding, I think was it? Where essentially
Oh yeah, I forgot about that.
we were
Yeah.
playing like a glorified delivery man. It was just
Yeah.
like
Oh, I don't know too much about that one.
neither do I. I really didn't get too far into it. All I know is like you have to deliver. It starts off like with like simple things where you have to like deliver medical supplies, but eventually you get a package and you have to deliver it. And apparently the in the package is a baby, and you have to walk. There's no there's no there's no power ups. There's no transports. There's no your character essentially has to traverse weird terrain to make his delivery, and like it's part of the storyline. I never really got into the full story itself, but it just seemed like a weird one. But apparently, it because of Kojima and because of Norman Reedus, people loved it. So if you were
Okay.
fans of both of them, like it was a game to play. And then there was plans for a possible sequel, but I don't know. I never followed up on it past that one. So, but hey, you never know.
Well, just double back on that for a second. That was around the time when Konami canceled, I think, their upcoming Castlevania game. Which I mean, Castlevania and Konami, they're basically synonymous with each other. They've been putting them out since about the mid 1980s, as I recall.
Hmm.
To the point where the guy who did the Castlevania games, I can't, I'm neglecting the Japanese fellow's name off the top of my head, pardon me, but it got to the point where he even basically went out and created new characters in the same design of the game and put out a game that was basically the same as Castlevania Symphony of the Night, except he just couldn't use any of the Castlevania properties for it, so he just made up this whole new horror mythology for it.
Was that the Bloodstained game?
Yes, that was Bloodstained Ritual of the Night. That is correct. Which is anybody out there who likes that style of game where you have to search around and to access different areas of whatever you're going, you have to find different power ups so you can jump higher or double jump or turn into a bat or go underwater or open this door or whatever. So it's a lot of fun and a lot of good combat. So yeah,
Yeah, I love
get
how
into it if
that
you're into that kind of thing.
I love how that genre of game has been referred to now as Metroidvania.
Yes.
It just seems kind of like a weird mashup of Castlevania and Metroid. But yeah, I mean, it's right. You run around and you do a bunch of different things just to collect power ups, defeat different bosses, find secret rooms, hidden pathways. So it was always a lot of fun. I'm trying to see if I can find the creator of the game here. See developer, directors, producers. Nope, nothing
If
currently.
I heard the name, I would be able to confirm it, but that's the best I can do. So
Uh,
while Eric looks that up, go ahead.
Koji Igarashi.
I think so. I think that sounds right.
Yeah, it says here
Yeah.
Bloodstained, spiritual successor to Castlevania series by Konami, of which Koji Igarashi had been the series producer from '01 to 2010.
Okay. Yeah. That's our man.
There you go. Yeah, it's weird in the world of video games where you will have these creators, and then once they have some level of success, rather than allowing them to continue to make the games, they'll start promoting them, and when they get promoted, they get taken away from the games essentially. They start heading up teams that then do the job that they originally were doing. Which, don't get me wrong, it's great if you have a team at that point because you can get a lot more stuff done depending on how the budget goes. But another gentleman by the name of KJ Inafune, who was the creator for Mega Man and Mega Man X, and more particularly Mega Man X, where he got promoted to the point where he was an executive and he was no longer in like working with the team as far as making the game. And that's what he got pissed off as well, because a very similar thing happened with him, where he ended up leaving Capcom to make a game called Mighty Number 9. But that one was hit with so many different like setbacks and behind the scenes nonsense that by the time the game came out, it didn't hit the way that everybody was hoping it was going to. Yeah, it felt again like the spiritual successor to Mega Man, but it just fell short of a lot of expectations. And Inafune was hoping to just get back to doing what he loves, and it's not that easy when corporate office is like, no, you go sit at your desk and you just direct all the people under you. It's just like, that's not what you really want to do. When your passion is making the games, that's what you want to work with.
Between that kind of nonsense of having them putting people into positions they don't really belong in, or my other favorite is, okay, we have a new CEO of a company and he needs to put his stamp on the company. So this thing that we were really good at before, it's like, no, we're going to get rid of this. We're going to change this up. And you end up with just a big steaming pile of shit. I mean, that's one of the classic reasons you always hear of TV shows getting canceled at networks before their runs are done, even if they're relatively successful shows. Is, the new CEO comes in, he's like, well, I don't like this property, therefore we're going to get rid of it. I need to put my stamp on everything. I think that was the famous story for Deadwood over at HBO.
Well, that's another good example right there as far as HBO, because they just had their merger between Warner Brothers and Discovery. And that was the whole debacle at the Warner Brothers studios, where certain movies were canned, certain movies were killed before they went through development. And, infamously, the Batgirl movie was shelved and put into the vault, never to see the light of day. Although now there's new rumors that might eventually get released one day, just not in theaters. But
I completely forgot about that. They just straight up canceled a fucking Batman, or like a Batman universe movie. Like, what kind of a maniac? Like, what is wrong with people?
From what it was said from the studio heads, the movie was not releasable. I don't know if it was too campy, too cheesy. The effects, weren't done supposedly. It was not a finished movie. It was like in test audience phases. There was still some work to be done on it as far as like finishing it up. But yeah, the new studio heads were just like, oh, we're just going to throw weight around. And they got rid of a few things. Now, don't get me wrong. Certain projects got greenlit that were questionable to begin with. They were going to make the Wonder Twins movie, or a TV series. So that one was kind of, I don't know if you remember from the Super Friends. There were the two characters. One would take the form of an animal. The other one would take the form of an inanimate object.
Were they the ones who had black hair and they wore like different shades of purple?
Yes. I believe it was Jenna and Jace, I want to say.
Oh, yeah. I remember them.
But yeah, that whole gimmick of form of a bucket, form of water, whatever the case was. And they would like go off and fight whatever supervillain was of the week. But that was going to be brought up to modern times. And I don't know if it was going to be a comedy or action or whatever the case was, but it was going to be developed. And then when the new studio heads came in, they said, we're going to trim the fat. Wonder Twins? Not happening. So that one went away. A couple other movies were either killed off in production or sequels were not greenlit. There was going to be a follow-up to Swamp Thing at one point, because they had the one series that debuted on the DC Universe app. And then it was for a short time transported over to HBO Max, but I think it was taken off entirely. And apparently that first season of the new Swamp Thing was very well received. But because of the maintenance to keep the sets and everything else, it cost a lot of money. So they said rather than spending that extra money and keeping everything housed, they just did away with it entirely.
You see, though, I can understand if, these studios are in business to make money. So even if something is well received, but it's cost prohibitive to make, at least I can see that point. At least the accountant in me says, okay, if you're running in the red, I understand the point. might not be happy about it, but I at least understand where they're coming from, as opposed to an executive on like a weird ego trip.
But it just makes you, like you said before, they want to leave their stamp on it. So another good example of that was when they were doing the Justice League movie. They wanted to release the Justice League movie so badly that even though Zack Snyder had a family emergency and had to leave, rather than allowing him to leave and come back and delaying the project a little bit, maybe, they called up Joss Whedon at that point to come in and fill in for him and put his stamp on it. So they had to like do a certain amount of reshoots to make it Joss Whedon's Justice League. And the studio heads are like, oh yeah, we just got to push it through. Probably because they just wanted the movie to be released at a certain point in time to be eligible for certain bonuses due to their contracts. And that created another shitstorm as far as like the gentleman who played Cyborg, I'm blanking on his name, I think it was Ray Fisher, was talking about how he was mistreated on the set and Joss Whedon was, demeaning to him and everything else. And the way that he conducted himself was not professional, this whole thing. It just created more of a shitstorm. And it just seems like the studio system, especially in Warner Brothers recently, has not been the greatest. So they've been catching a lot of backlash when it comes to some of these superhero shows, especially when they're just trying to crank them out to try to make money. Like you said, they're in the business to make money. Nobody like goes into this saying, "Oh, we're gonna willfully lose a few $1 million." No, you put in $200 million. You're hoping to conservatively make back hopefully $600 million, doubling the budget, and not to mention the advertising and everything else for it and promoting it. But it's such. I don't know how they even quantify it and how, what the studio math is nowadays. Things have changed so dramatically in the last few years. It's gotten kind of out of hand.
Well, the entire Justice League and the DCU or DC universe have been a pretty good example of what I've always wanted. And you've talked about this in past years, because the Justice League movie, I believe it came out, I want to say November 2017. And it was one of those movies where I had zero desire to watch. I remember asking you how it was after you saw it, probably about, and you just said, "Well, there were some good parts." You were trying so hard to see it through, but it was just like you were basically just skipping the away for saying, like, "Christ, what a piece of shit." And I've heard some people say, and I know I watched the Zack Snyder cut 2 years ago. I remember none of it. That's how unmemorable it was for me.
The Snyder Cut always came off to me. Now, don't get me wrong. Visually, he does a great job telling a story, but there are so many parts of the Snyder Cut. Like, oh, I understand why it was cut down. I understand why there's an editing process now, because there are so many parts of it that were like almost like a music video in motion that was like. You were just missing the actual like beginning and end credits like you would have seen on MTV or VH1 back in the day. There were just portions of it, like when Flash saves the one girl in the street, and then you've got Aquaman coming out of the water to go to the bar, and then they sing some kind of a hymn as he goes back into the water, and they keep his sweater. Like, some shit was just like, do you really need all this extra? But yeah, no, you're right. As far as the original Justice League version of it, I enjoyed it for the parts that were fun, but there was a lot of it was just like, the DC just has a major task ahead of them trying to rebuild and make it all seem not even cohesive, but just enjoyable. Because certain parts of those movies were just like dark or just boring. Oh, and before I forget, the Wonder Twins were Zan and Jaina. Before anybody sends me an email, Jenna and Jace were the two characters from Space Ghost.
So. Oh, I know what you mean. Okay. So yeah, it's just to kind of wrap up this so we don't linger on it too long. So if I remember correctly, please tell me if I'm wrong. So James Gunn, his final Marvel project was Guardians 3, because that wrapped up that entire thing, right?
Correct.
Marvel, and he's going to be calling the shots for the DC universe. Is that correct?
He and his partner, I can't remember his partner's name off the top of my head, but yes, they have now been put in charge of the DCEU and
Lloyd
whatever.
Kaufman.
No. Oh my God. Can you imagine if Lloyd Kaufman was part of the DCEU now?
I'd be way more motivated to watch those movies if Lloyd Kaufman was part of the creative head. So
I do enjoy whenever he makes a cameo in some of James Gunn's work. More specifically, when he was in the prison in the first Guardians movie. I can't remember where else he pops up in the second and third one, but in Peacemaker, or not Peacemaker. James Gunn's Suicide Squad. There's a scene where they go to a bar and Lloyd Kaufman's hanging out there as well. So it's just like,
well, you know, if it wasn't for Lloyd Kaufman, we would not have James Gunn actually, and we wouldn't have Zack Snyder either. So good on him. But anyway, getting back to the point you were saying before my goofy joke.
What was I saying? We were talking about the other partner.
Okay.
I can't remember his name. God damn it! I keep forgetting things now. I'm getting old. But yes, James Gunn and this other gentleman are now part of the DCEU. They're heading up. So essentially, instead of having a Kevin Feige, as they always refer to it as, for Marvel, now you've got two guys heading up for DC, and they're going to be in charge of all the different stories. So Flash, Blue Beetle, and I think we still have the other Aquaman movie coming real soon, are going to be the final projects that are released under the old banner, quote unquote. But they still might be incorporated into the newer DCEU stories.
Okay.
So hopefully from there, with James Gunn's vision and his, he and his partner's plan, then we might have more of a through hole with the storylines where everything just falls into place. Not necessarily cohesive, because some things hit or miss depending, but hopefully they'll be able to from there go forward and tell a storyline that makes sense. So like if Superman has this encounter, you might be able to reference it in another Batman movie or Wonder Woman movie, depending, and it won't seem out of place.
All right. Well, I think the biggest, if anyone's got the talent to do this, it's going to be James Gunn. The single best thing that Warner Brothers can do for him is not fucking meddle in his plans. Just let the guy see if he can pull it off without having to, well, we want this, and throwing too many executives who don't really understand the process jumping into the mix, and just give him an honest shot and let him see if he can fucking salvage this, because this has been a clusterfuck since 2016.
About that, yeah.
Because you kicked off with, Dawn of Justice, Batman, Superman, and let's be honest, most of that movie fucking sucked. Right off the rip, it's like, this really needs to be, what was it, like 2.5 hours long?
Yeah, oh yeah. They were like trying to cram everything in there. The most important thing that people miss when they talk about Marvel and DC, because they're always compared just because they're comic book companies. The framing for their movies are very, very different. Marvel's got the family friendly, bright and cheery most of the time. DC's got more of the dark and gritty, and it gets really depressing sometimes. But when it comes to the framing of the movies, we talked about it already, where we mentioned Infinity War and Endgame. If they would have ended it after Endgame, you would have been satisfied with it, because it told this whole story. Yes. What was it, 11 years of movies? And
2008 to 2019.
So you built up to this huge crescendo, and then you could have easily said, "Good night, folks. Thanks for coming." But DC, you're like, "Oh shit, we got to catch up." So they're trying to cram all these different stories into this small span of movies. When it came to Batman v Superman or Justice League, somebody had put it very well when they said, you haven't earned that yet in terms of a movie audience. Like, you have to build up to that. Give me a Batman. Give me a Batman and Robin. Give me a Superman. Give me a Wonder Woman. Give me all those other characters. You don't even have to have them separate all the time. You can have them start to bleed into one another. But then eventually you will build up to that Justice League. And then you could have your 2-part Justice League where they eventually take on Darkseid. But because they crammed everything in there, you hadn't earned that Batman v Superman battle yet. It just felt so so rushed and so, ill-conceived that by the time you got it, you're like, oh, they're doing the Dark Knight Returns. Isn't that when Batman retires? Like he's done with it, but now we have Batman meeting Superman for the first time, and immediately they're at odds, and by the end of it, Batman's like, "Oh, I fucked up. He's dead now, but I fucked up." It's,
it's like what are you guys doing? I mean, if you think about it, and let's be honest here, like I don't think Marvel really knew they were still putting it all together. Like probably even in I think it was like 2009 before they were like, okay, we might actually be able to make a run at this, and they started laying because 2008 Iron Man was like it's an interesting thing. I was thinking about this the other day. 2008 was an interesting year for these movies because everybody was anticipating Dark Knight because the viral campaign involving the Joker played by Heath Ledger and all that started like almost a year beforehand in like late 2007. And so everybody was building up to that, but then out of nowhere, here comes the Iron Man movie, and that was I remember like not catching it in theaters, but watching it on DVD that fall, which I believe I got in the mail through Netflix, as one did at the time, and to further date the entire affair. But I remember watching it and being like, that was just fun. Like it was just, yeah, like watching Dark Knight felt like it's like, okay, this is an undertaking. But watching Iron Man, that's one of those movies where I'll just, sometimes I'll just pull up a couple of clips from it, like fun pieces of it, and I'll just watch them on YouTube. Or actually, I just rewatched Iron Man last week when I was just sitting around, like, just killing time while I was working on something else.
mm-hmm.
So, yeah, but it was just so much, like, lighter, airier, more fun, and just, I mean, if there was a role that it seems like Robert Downey Jr. was born for, it seems like Tony Stark. So.
And it's funny because they didn't want to cast him at that point in time because in his career they thought like he was washed up and just an addict that was never going to get himself clean.
Well, he had a rough decade before that.
He did. No, absolutely. I mean, a lot of people don't touch upon that often. I mean, he himself sometimes kind of like, not that he glazes over it, but it's behind him at this point. So there's no reason for him really to dwell on it too much. But when it comes up in interviews, like it's a sore spot. But yeah, and for anybody who doesn't remember, Robert Downey Jr., like in the 80s was in a bunch of different movies. And then just, fell victim to, his demons, quote unquote, and got hooked on a bunch of different things. And, what was that? At one point he broke into somebody's house because he thought it was his house actually. And then went to go try to like fall asleep in their home. And people were like, what the fuck's going on? So they had to like call the cops or whatever.
Well, it was less falling asleep and it was more he was on a nod from heroin. So.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, there you go. Yeah. So he has a lot of nonsense from his past. To which, when it comes to signing off on the insurance for a movie, people are like, we don't know if he's going to be, able to do the project, and we want to, miss out on this premium, whatever the case was. But thankfully, was it Jon Favreau and some of the other people said, no, we want him, and we think he's going to be a great fit. And yeah, the first Iron Man movie is fantastic because it's a standalone movie. There's nothing more to it. Yeah, we got all the other stuff after the fact, but if you watch that in comparison to Iron Man 2 feels more like a chapter in the Marvel MCU universe. Like it's just slotted, this is going to continue this, whatever the case is. But yeah, the first one, it's a great movie. Like as close to perfect as you can get as far as storytelling, which is kind of weird.
It's a very well made movie. Fun fact, I can't remember what it was. I think it was a movie around 2000. So Robert Downey Jr., that was a time period when people didn't really understand the concept of dual diagnosis, where they had to diagnose, or they had to basically deal with his drug addiction and also psychological issues at the same time. So they were constantly trying to attack one front without realizing it's like, we have to take care of both of those things. And I'm sure a lot of the science on this is older than I know it, but I didn't really start hearing this terminology until like the late 2000s, like 06, 07, 08, where they basically said it's like, okay, we need a two-pronged attack to deal with the psychological issues and also deal with the drug issues. And then once they got all of that figured out, he was, all of a sudden he was doing great all over again. But there was that time period when you're right, he could not get bonded for a film. In fact, if I remember correctly, I think it was Mel Gibson that actually put up money for him to get bonded on, or basically he put up the money for him on one movie to pay the insurance because the studio's like, there's no way in hell we're paying for this guy. He's too much of a liability right now. I cannot remember what movie it is, and I almost went to reach for my remote to look it up on that one because I am on my phone right now. But yeah, it was wild because I mean, even if you think about it, like yeah, he was so down, you know, like 2001, 2002. He was on a few people's like he was on death lists. Like there was a time period where like one of these days we're gonna hear like breaking news: Robert Downey Jr. found dead of drug overdose, or found dead, on Skid Row, stabbed to death, or God knows what. But the guy like really, really, really turned it around. And I'm glad he did because I mean, Jesus, I'm not sure if it's changed or anything, but I know for a while their Avengers Endgame was like the number one grossing movie of all time. Although I think, oh, what's that James Cameron nonsense? Avatar.
Yes.
I believe they re-released Avatar within the last couple of years, and the additional box office money from it, of everybody going to see it again, I believe that kind of pushed them back over the top. So
It's funny because, especially now that Disney owns it all, yeah, the first Avatar movie came out and it did really well, became the champion of the box office, and then when I can't remember if it was Infinity War or Endgame, I believe it was Endgame, that took over for a while. But then, yeah, that one had a re-release for Avatar. Funny enough, they had a re-release for Endgame as well at one point.
Yes.
So there was like, they were edging back and forth. And then eventually, yes, they re-released Avatar again. And it took back over the top spot for the time being. But it's funny because Disney at this point is just like, we don't care. I mean, if you buy a ticket to see again, sure, why not? All the advertising and everything went out years ago. All the editing, all the process, like they're just cans sitting in a lab somewhere. Like, oh yeah, you want this movie? Sure, and they'll send them back out. Going back to what you said, yes, it was Mel Gibson who helped out Robert Downey Jr. Says here, Downey got his first post-rehabilitation acting job in August of '01, lip syncing in the video for Elton John's single "I Want Love." Where is it here? Downey was able to return to big screen after Mel Gibson, who had been a close friend to Downey since both had co-starred in Air America. Holy shit, I forgot about that movie.
Oh yeah, going back to the late '80s on that one.
Yeah, paid Downey's insurance bond for the 2003 film The Singing Detective. Gibson's gamble paved the way for Downey's comeback, and Downey returned to mainstream films in the mid-2000s with Gothica, for which producer Joel Silver withheld 40% of Downey's salary until after production wrapped as insurance against his addictive behavior. Similar clauses became standard in his contracts throughout the 2000s. Also got the actor the leading role in the comedy thriller Kiss Kiss Bang Bang. So there you go. You were right on the money for that one.
Yeah, I remember something like that. I didn't realize it was that early as 2001. I thought he was still like going through rehab at that point. So, but my timetable was off. But I do remember Mel Gibson like coming out for the guy, which is wild because that would have been, if he put up that money and he was helping them out in like 2001, 2002, 2003. That was kind of before Mel Gibson went nuts.
Oh yes, the meltdown.
Yeah, when all of a sudden he was making Passion of the Christ and getting arrested for drunk driving and then going on in ridiculous rants about the Jews. So because at that point it's like why do all these great actors have to also be like butt fuckingly insane?
Well, that's the age-old question. Like, what does it take to make a great artist? As far as like an actor or a performer, because a lot of these people have something wrong internally that they tap into something that allows them to reach heights or reach certain levels that other performers can't get to, and they're so revered for it, but unfortunately it's very detrimental to their health or to the well-being of other people around them. So
yeah, good point.
It's the weird catch-22 for whatever reason. So
well, I always think of the one example I heard. Are you familiar with John Frusciante?
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah, so for the sake of those listening, John Frusciante, he was the guitarist for the Red Hot Chili Peppers, wrote a ton of their hits. He's considered to be an absolute just a genius with a guitar, but he doesn't know how to drive a car, and I don't think he understands the concept of driving a car either. I believe he has somebody who lives with him who basically manages like his life because none of that even makes sense. I mean, it was, and it got to the point where when he left Chili Peppers, and I think it was like 92, 93, because he got bored and with how commercialized they were getting, at the point in time when Blood Sugar Sex Magic was selling like, I don't know, I think it sold like 8 or 9 million copies back in the 90s.
Jesus.
But he just basically disappeared into his house and just got like so ganked out on drugs and so fucked up and basically became a shut-in that after they pulled him out of the house and put him into rehab, where like a bunch of people like Gibby Haynes from the Butterball Surfers and I think Chili Peppers helped out and like that, they basically said if you do not get help, you are going to die. If not from like all like the fucking needle, the fucking like the needles going in your veins, like his teeth got so bad that they were causing like infections throughout his entire body.
Really?
Yeah, and I remember reading the story like after they got him out of the house was in such disrepair from him being a shut-in who was just like zoned out on drugs all the time. They basically had to rip the entire house down and rebuild it. Like it was just fucked. Yeah, like he was just. If you look around online, there's actually footage of the house, like before it was ripped down, after they took him out of it to take him to rehab, and it looks like it needs to be cleaned, burned, and then cleaned again. Like it's bad.
Okay,
but
that's. Oof.
But it's one of those things. Like I said, like the guy, if you said write me a hit riff, he can write you a hit riff in 2 seconds. But if you say go balance your checkbook, he's going to look at you just confused. So yeah, but it's like I guess I think you're right. There's some people who they're operating on that level. They've got that level of genius. Like I've worked with people like that before. I once worked with he was one of the co-founders of a company I used to work for. Jokingly around the office, they would refer to him as the patent factory because the guy has got like his name is on over 100 different patents related to optical electrical equipment. He's built so much stuff that helps like cell phone towers work, and he has got this unique understanding of these incredibly complex concepts with how we transmit information nowadays. But I remember once upon a time, Jimmy was telling me, because Jimmy worked at this company too for a little while, he had a young daughter, and watching him struggle to try to just even relate to or speak with or just, and you could tell he loved his daughter, but he just didn't know how to talk to her,
Wow.
Yeah, he was just and he was a nice enough guy, but he was just a very, Jimmy, in years past, as we talked about, Jimmy was like, I'm willing to bet you cash if you tested him, he's autistic. And not in like a negative or bad way, but it's just in how the guy's mind functions. So
yeah, the way he processes information is just different than the rest. It's kind of like, well, what would you be willing to give up if you wanted to become like a master at something or a superstar at something? Like their brains can only go so far with what they're dealing with. That, like you said, if somebody's gonna give up driving, the ability to drive a car, or the ability to do math, hell, the ability to tie your shoes, something like that just eludes them. And they don't know why. It's just, for whatever reason, it doesn't interest them, so they never really bothered to learn it. But everything else, like, they can easily take to, whether it be acting, music, or whatever the case, writing. Who knows? Like, it would not surprise me that if you find out, like, a lot of, like, the big names in Hollywood or in music do have some kind of, like, mental disability, or labeled mental disability, but something that makes them different from the rest, that's why they can perform the way they do.
Yeah, and I wouldn't call it a mental disability. As we're finding out about this stuff, I think it's just differences in how the brain processes information.
Yeah, absolutely. I say mental disability in that that's how it's classified nowadays, unfortunately.
Oh, I follow, yeah. Okay.
But like when somebody says, "Oh, my child is autistic," most people are like, "Oh, I'm so sorry for you." No, don't feel sorry. That's obviously, it's going to be a little bit of a struggle, a little bit different, but who knows what that might lead to later in life, as they develop. Who knows? Like you were talking about the guy who has all the patents. They might see something different in life that allows them to create or invent something that had never been before, and that's because of this quote unquote disability. No, it's just a different way that their brain works that we just don't understand, that we call it a disability, but who knows, it might be a gift for them in the long run. And we're gonna be like, oh shit, well, good for them.
Yeah.
We just didn't understand it. So yeah,
No.
it's like when you see a lot of like artists or painters, you know, they'll spend hours on end on a piece of artwork, and you're like, oh, that looks really cool. Are you done with it? Like, no, I'm not. I'm still working on it. Like, it looks finished from where I'm standing. No, it's I still got to do this, and I still got to add that, and their brain perceives it differently. So like we can't see what they see most of the time. And
No, and it's also, when they get so consumed by something to work on it and to hit that like master or expert level for something, you know, they also might forget to eat.
yeah, that does happen. They forget to eat. They forget to take care of themselves. Um, they might develop a sickness because of it, because you know their lack of care or lack of general hygiene sometimes. So they'll just be, like you said, like a shut in, or just isolate themselves from the public. It's also a reason why a lot of people just don't mix well with the public at large. I automatically go to Prince. Like, I
He's a
don't
good
know.
example.
Yeah, I don't know how his brain worked, and I'm not even talking about like anything like his religious beliefs. He obviously worked on a different level. He did not like interacting with people unless he was in control of the situation. He did not like having certain people around him at certain times. It just I remember the stories of him saying like he never listens to music on the radio. If he wants to listen to music, he'll go write something. So like that was a different individual altogether. Like I don't know if you want to say he was on a level of his own, but he was definitely apart from everybody else. But he was so amazing in what he could do. And I wonder how much longer it's going to be before we get some new material that had been locked away in the quote unquote vault that he just kept writing and writing and writing and just never released stuff.
Well, that was the famous story that he had, what, several dozen like fully written and produced albums that he just said, for reasons that even like his assistants couldn't quite figure out, he just said, no, we're not releasing that, lock it up.
Yeah.
And nobody could quite figure out like what he was, I'm sure it made perfect sense to him. Unfortunately, we're not going to get those answers. It's hard to believe he's been gone for April was 7 years since he passed.
Yep.
But yeah, because he died. Yeah, that was the big shot in the arm at that point. Was Prince and China died right around the same time
Did they?
in April. Yeah, April 2016.
Holy shit, you're right.
Yeah, that one. I don't know why that one so like stands out in my head. The summer 2015 deaths and the Prince China thing always stand out in my head for some odd reason.
Hmm.
But yeah, because in there was like that 5 week span in 2015 where Dusty Rhodes died, Nature Boy Buddy Landell, who was the lesser known guy, he was more of a territory wrestler, especially in the era of like Mid South wrestling. And then like that Dusty was late June, and then first week of August was Roddy Piper.
Yep.
But getting back to Prince, there as I've taken 19 digressions here. Yeah, I mean, like of course we've talked about this before. I think in past years. I mean, there's that great story of how in 2001 Prince contacted Kevin Smith to go make that documentary about religion for him,
Mm-hmm.
and which originally that all started out as he just wanted to use like I think he just wanted to use the Prince song "The Most Beautiful Girl in the World." And for some reason, I think Prince owned Morris Day and the Times Music Publishing for some wacky reason.
Yep.
Yeah, and he was like, "Oh, I want to use this for the movie." He's like, "Well, I'm not going to give you my song, but you can have the Morris Day and the Times song." And then he was like, "Oh yeah, I want to make a documentary with me." And he was like, "What? Oh, okay, sure, you fucking weirdo."
If I remember correctly, that was when they had the weird listening parties, and then all of a sudden Prince comes out and joins the listening party. It's just like, okay.
Yeah, and it just turned into like him like going off and like tangents about religion and Jesus and stuff like that. And it's like, we're just here to listen to records, but hey,
If I remember correctly, that also never got released. That was put in the vault, the documentary that Kevin Smith made.
I'm pretty sure you are correct.
So again, it's just like another weird thing. I remember for the longest time, if you tried to look up a Prince song online on YouTube, you would get the visual of the music video, but it would be a different audio that would be overlaid because they were not allowed to play the audio. But ever since
Yeah, he was. Go ahead.
ever since he passed away, Now you can find the music on YouTube.
Yeah, his estate, which I'm not even sure exactly who owns his stuff now, if there's like an executor or like a family member got it or what happened with it. But I remember all of a sudden everything popping up because, yeah, at one point in time, I ended up thinking about, I think during like the lockdowns, I rewatched the 1989 Batman, and I got to thinking about the Batman song about Bat Dance by Prince,
Yes.
and I rewatched the video, and I was like, holy fuck, this is fucking insane. Like it's a fun video, but it's so fucking weird.
I remember, Purple Rain and a bunch of the, When Doves Cry and all the other different music videos that were out around that time. But when I saw Bat Dance, I didn't know what the fuck I was watching. and
I don't I don't think anyone knew what the hell they were watching. And here we are 30 plus years later.
but it's fucking catchy.
Oh hell yeah.
It's a really good song. And the music video, even like him dressed up as like half Batman, half Joker, it just, I don't know. It stands on its own. Like it's such a weird thing. And then when they, what was the other song they played? When they were in the museum during the movie and the Joker's defacing all the paintings. Yes, Party Man.
Yeah, there you go.
I remember having the cassette single when I went down to Guatemala one time. And I just kept playing it over and over again. And then one of our cousins stole it from me. Like, God damn it. I had to buy it again when I came back stateside. Oh, man, that was fun.
I often think of the discussion between the director and Prince, where the director walks up to him and be like, "So, Prince, what do you want to do in this video?" He's like, "I want to be one of the characters in the video. I want to be, and he's like, "Oh, do you want to be Batman or Joker?" Yes.
Oh, okay, pick one. Yes.
Yes, I made my decision. I am Prince.
Oh man, yeah, and you know what? It's funny because if you look back on the stories of people who met him and like the weird shenanigans that had happened when he was in public, like the one guy who says he wanted to go up to him and meet him during an event or a concert, whatever the case was, and he goes up to talk to him and shakes his hand, and all of a sudden Prince like walks off in a huff, and the next thing he knows, he's talking to some guy. And then a bodyguard comes over and goes, Prince says you have to leave the building. What do you mean you have to leave the building? Prince says you have to leave the building. He does not want you in the building with him. What do you mean I have to leave the building? It's my building. So like he would just, people would rub him the wrong way. And at that point, he just had a certain expectation from those around him, whether they worked for him or even those who didn't work for him. Like you can't look him in the eye, you can't speak to him directly, or whatever the case was. There was like a bunch of crazy stories. Again, if you go back to An Evening with Kevin Smith, he has his story and his little anecdote with Prince. It's just weird stuff, but it's the way he worked. Even if you go back to the Dave Chappelle, where he does that retelling of Prince, especially when they go back to his place to play basketball, because apparently he was a huge fanatic of basketball, and he'd be like outplaying everybody on the court, and nobody knew exactly what to do with this tiny guy in high heels running around just shooting shots like crazy.
He was draining threes all fucking day long. Yeah, man.
Again, like it makes you wonder, like, was his lack of social interaction give him the ability to be such a great performer and artist and music writer? Because the amount of different instruments he played, and the amount of different, songs and albums, not to mention the different careers that he helped out and different bands he formed. He was just all over musically, but he was a genius in certain regards. What does it take to get to that level? I mean, hard work is one thing, like learning and practicing and all that. The grind of becoming adept at playing music is one thing, but to be on those levels, what was given up in the genetic build? I don't know. I guess we'll never know.
No, that's one of those recipes where we don't know what it is, and it's probably for the best that we don't know what it is. Because that's one of those things where if a parent knew how to do it, there are unscrupulous people out there who would say, well, I'm going to raise my kid exactly this way, and then we're going to manipulate them so they're a musical genius, or they're an acting genius, or a writing genius. And so this will be my cash cow going forward. And that's a breathtakingly unethical way to raise a child, I think.
Yeah, I mean, how do you balance that?
Exactly. That's why it's good that we don't know that we don't know what these formulas are to basically how to create another Prince or how to create a Robert Downey Jr. or how to create an Orson Welles or create a James Joyce or, insert any name of amazing, transcendent artist in here. So,
Yeah, that's kind of nuts. I don't know. There was one thing I wanted to mention to you before I forget, and
what's
since we were talking about Batman and Joker, I know you haven't watched Fast X, but did you hear about the development after Fast X came out? More
you
specifically,
mean the
between
post-credit scenes?
yes,
Oh, that's the thing. I already know everything that happened in Fast X because I went and I read the Wikipedia article.
okay,
Um, yeah,
so
because I am Mr. Spoilers.
okay,
So,
so I wanted to ask you, what are your thoughts on that and the fact that if, for anybody listening, we are talking about the fact that The Rock, Dwayne Johnson, had a very public feud with Vin Diesel. And eventually it ended up them splitting ways where they didn't want to work with one another at all. Even when they filmed the last Fast and Furious movie that they were in together, they never were actually on set together. They filmed separately. When they were getting ready to make Fast 10, Vin Diesel had reached out to The Rock saying, "Come back, we need you. You're part of the family. This movie can't be made without you." And The Rock very publicly said, "Thanks, but no thanks," and went off to do his own thing. But now, as we're talking about the post-credit scene in Fast X, spoiler if you haven't seen it, it's been out for a few weeks now. The very end, you go through the whole movie with Jason Momoa's character of Dante going after Vin Diesel's Dominic Toretto, blaming him for the death of his father, the drug lord in Fast 5, was it? When they went to Brazil?
yeah, Fast Five.
The entire time you're watching Dante going after Vin Diesel, trying to make him suffer and, just give him a world of pain. But you forget that it wasn't Vin Diesel's character that killed the drug lord in Brazil. In fact, it was the character of Hobbs, played by The Rock, who walks up and puts like 2 bullets in his head. And the entire movie, you're like,
Something like that.
why didn't Dante go after The Rock instead? Well, that post-credit scene, you see a guy who was masked up from head to toe going into this, what was it, like a theater or something like
I can't remember.
that? Okay.
Mhm.
Goes in, is like on a mission, is following up on a tip. When he gets there, he finds a phone, picks up the phone, and it's Dante, Jason Momoa's character. And you find out that when the guy finally unmasks, it's the character of Hobbs. And even though The Rock said he would never come back to a Fast and Furious movie, or at least he would never work with Vin Diesel again, surprise, surprise, we may get him in the next Fast and Furious movie, which apparently there's going to be 2 more at this point to finish out the franchise in its main timeline, I guess you can call it.
Oh, so let me get this straight. Okay, so this is where I was completely uninformed. I was under the impression that they were going to do Fast 10 Part 2 was going to be in 2024, and that was going to be the conclusion.
That was the original idea up until very shortly before the release of Fast 10. The studio came out and said, "What would you say to making the last movie 2 parts?" Which I think threw a monkey wrench in for Louis Leterrier when he was writing and shooting, because at one point they were about to go to one of the they were going to go to one of the locations, and Vin Diesel came up to Leterrier and said, "Hey, we have this idea for the ending of the movie." But Louis Leterrier says, "But we have this ending for the movie." He goes, "Yeah, I know. You have to rewrite the whole thing before we land." So the third act of that move of Fast 10 had to be rewritten in a matter of hours, and then they were going to go shoot it. The ending of Fast 10, for anybody who hasn't seen it yet, and I'm not trying to spoil anything, ends on a very weird cliffhanger. So essentially what you're watching in Fast 10 is Act 1 of the last 3 movies. So don't know how it's going to play out just yet. Yes, you are correct in saying that they were going to have Fast 10, Fast 11, and that was it. Now it's going to be Fast 10, Fast 11, Fast 12, and now they're talking about doing spin-offs. So you might see another Hobbs, not necessarily another Hobbs and Shaw, because now there's rumors that even Jason Statham and Dwayne Johnson don't get along. Don't know if that's true or not.
Well, The Rock's been having a rough year. But this is wild because, so wait a minute. So is this going to be Fast 10, Fast 11, and Fast 12, or is it going to be Fast 10, Part 1, Part 2, and Part 3? That's where I'm confused.
That might be how it's finally conceived. I hope so at the very least, because I think they're running out of subtitles.
Okay.
Because you've got like Tokyo Drift was like I guess the last original one, because it was what, Fast and Furious, Too Fast, Too Furious, Tokyo Drift, The Fast and the Furious. I from there I start getting lost as far as like all the different ones that they
Okay,
came
no,
up
you
with.
got it. Okay, so Fast and Furious in 2001, Too Fast, Too Furious in 2003. Fast and Furious Tokyo Drift was in 2006,
Which is a prequel to
2000,
everything.
which is a prequel to all of that. And then 2008, I think it was, we got The Fast and the Furious. And then 2011, we got the incarnation now, because 2011 was Fast 5, 2013 was Fast 6, 2015 was Fast 7, then 2017 was Fate of the Furious. And then
Oh,
and that was
man.
where we start getting really weird. And then 20, and then Fast and Furious 9. That's the one that got really wonky, because that was literally slated to open like weeks after the lockdowns hit.
Yeah.
So they bumped that one out they moved that one from April 2020 to like June, I want to say June 2021. Because I remember a friend of mine renting a theater, and I went to go see that with like, so a quick, I don't think I ever told you this, quick Fast and Furious 9 story.
Okay.
So some friends of mine, we got turned on to Fast and Furious by accident. Um,
Oh god.
we went to a drive-in back in 2015 to go see Avengers: Age of Ultron, because I hadn't seen it at that point. So like, okay, let's go. And because we paid for the double feature, the other movie was Fast and Furious 7. So we looked at each other at my friends, and we're like, well, if it sucks, we'll just leave. But we already paid for the movie, might as well hang out and watch it. And this is the one where they're going up against Jason Statham. So we're watching this movie, and we just keep looking at each other like, is this really fucking happening? Because all of those movies, the longstanding theory that we've had is they're all superheroes. They're just too fucking stupid to realize they're superheroes. Because, in fact, there's even a joke about that in Fast and Furious 9, because literally it's like, you should be dead like 4 times over. Like, no, you can't pick up the front of a car, you asshole. No, you're not driving a car from a building to another building. And like, it's just ridiculous. Like, no, you can't stop your foot. And yes, I know the parking garage was half blown up already, but you stomping your foot is not going to create a shockwave strong enough to make the rest of it collapse, you fucking maniac. But
All these happen in the movie, by the way.
yeah, this is all real. I mean, in Fast and Furious 7, I'll never forget the scene where The Rock's in the hospital because he had to go. I think he missed part of filming because he had to go win the world title from CM Punk in the WWE. He see in the final scene, he was like, he looks up into the distance from his hospital room, and he sees an explosion. It says, "Looks like Toretto and the boys are back in town. They're going to need my help." He flexes, his cast explodes off of his arm. He steals an ambulance, drives the ambulance off an overpass onto a Predator drone. Everything explodes. He jumps out of the wreckage like, I'm okay, then picks up the fucking minigun attached to the Predator drone, dragging the rest of the flaming Predator drone wreckage behind him as he's firing a minigun. I was like, what the fuck are you doing? Like, and I was like, at that point, we were like, okay, these movies are insane, but fun.
Yes.
But in Fast and Furious 9, we went to the theater to go see it, and we rented out a theater because that way we knew everybody who was in there had their vaccines, and if anybody, we basically knew it's like, okay, since it's all our people, we trust that everybody is vaccinated and okay, because one of the people who joined us was going through chemotherapy at the time for cancer.
Okay.
So, and somebody else who joined us also was immunocompromised, so they couldn't run the risk of like being exposed to the unwashed masses and their stupidity. So what happened at one point in the movie, I was like, oh, I don't want to leave because I want to see what's going to happen next, but I really had to pee, so I left pissed. And when I came back, everybody was dead silent because I walked right back into the scene where all of a sudden Ja Rule and Tyrese were in outer fucking space. And I'm like, did they drive a car into outer fucking space? And everyone's like, yes. And I'm like, holy fuck balls. Like, what is happening?
Just a quick correction. It is ludicrous. Ja Rule has not been seen since Fast 1.
Oh, that's what I meant. Sorry, Ludacris. Not Ja Rule. Wow, I can't believe I fucked that up.
Because I can still, in my brain, hear the haunting echo of Monica as he loses in the first race in Fast 1.
You know what? And the funny thing is, I still haven't seen the first one.
Holy shit, really?
Oh yeah, I've only seen parts of 5, parts of 6, 7, 8, and 9 at this point.
I dare you to sit down. You don't have to do it all in one night. Just rewatch from 1 forward. You don't have to watch them in chronological movie universe order. Just watch them in their release date order and catch up with and see the humble beginnings of drag street racers and thieves becoming super spies and, as you said, practically superheroes that are just too dumb to know it. and the evolution of the writing, where it goes from like this weird cops and robbers thing in the first one to international super spy / superhero and nonsense that what it has become. The reason I bring this all up is because Jason Momoa's character,
yeah,
he's pretty much playing like his version of the Joker. He is so flamboyant. Some have even called him pansexual. He wears buns, he wears scrunchies, he wears blouses. He's just very out there. He just his asides. Like, I'm assuming he does a lot of ad-libbing in the movie itself, but he's like dancing around in a lot of different scenes. He's just fantastic. To the point, again, and this is all rumors, so I don't know if it's true or not, but the internet loves to feed rumors, that so when Momoa was doing his scenes with Vin Diesel, or even if he was like just filming his own scenes and Vin had to watch the dailies on at the end, he was doing whatever he could to try to make Vin Diesel break as far as his character. Vin Diesel never broke. In fact, he doubled down even further and got more serious. So it created this weird dynamic of Momoa just being out there and ridiculous. And it honestly was like very refreshing for the film because it wasn't so grim and gritty as they have been recently. Because we know Vin Diesel just wants to play like the ultimate superhero. He can never lose. He can never be wrong. He can never be hurt. It gets kind of frustrating after a while. But to see him now facing off against Momoa, supposedly now after filming, the reactions that Momoa's getting apparently are upsetting Vin Diesel.
Really?
Because he feels like the spotlight's being taken away from him.
Well, we do know Vin Diesel's kind of like a weird egomaniac. At least, I can't speak to other projects he's worked on, but at least we know Fast and Furious is his baby.
Mm-hmm. If I remember correctly, when he came back for that cameo at the end of Tokyo Drift, when the studios called him in because they were a little afraid about how the movie was going to perform, they called him up and they asked him, would you be willing to do this cameo at the end of the film? He said, I would if you give me the rights to Riddick.
Huh, okay.
There was no money that exchanged hands for that scene. He took the rights from Riddick, and at that point he could then produce Riddick, the subsequent films after that, independently, away from the studio. And
gotcha.
Whether that worked for better or worse, I don't know, because the other Riddick movies, it's pretty much, Dom Toretto in space with glowy eyes. That's pretty. Again, he doesn't lose, he doesn't get hurt, somehow he always wins, and he's always like the apex fighter out there. It's just weird. But getting back to Fast 10, it's weird to see or hear that still to this point that Vin Diesel is getting frustrated with other people's performances, probably outshining him. And I wonder what that's going to mean going forward for the last 2 movies. Because Momoa apparently was just having fun and doing his best to be the villain. But whether that's rubbing Vin Diesel the wrong way, it just seems kind of odd. And I hope nothing changes because... all right, so there's this one scene. Did you read the storyline online, you said? Or just the post-credits?
No, I ran through. I pretty much read like the plot summary on Wikipedia.
Okay. There's this one scene that after he takes over Cypher's army, spoilers for anybody who hasn't watched it yet. So Momoa's character of Dante commandeers the army of Cypher, and also takes on her tech team to set up all the different computer stuff for him. At one point, after they outlive their usefulness, you see him in this one scene. I think they're in Brazil, and Dante is sitting there painting somebody's toes, and he's having a conversation, and you find out it's the two nerds, but the two nerds are dead, and their eyes and mouths are being held in a smile and eyes open with scotch tape. But the weird part is, as Momoa is talking to them, as if they're still alive, each time that he says something to them, they give the dead bodies reaction shots. The first guy's got like this regular look on its face. I mean, regular as you can get for a dead guy who's got like blood coming out of his nose. But the other one is got like this horrendous grin on its face that apparently the studio and just about everybody in the movie said, we need to cut this from the film. This is too grim and disgusting. But to the point where one of the executives said, no, we're going to keep this because this is what gives the Dante character that moment of being a psychopath. He's not your typical villain. He's out there. He's crazy. And this is what we need. I think it was Fangoria on Twitter that actually retweeted this and that scene. And even they were like, what the fuck did we just watch in Fast and Furious? This is awesome, but it's so out of place. And that scene alone is getting a lot of attention. And people are like, I don't know if it's too far. I don't know if it's too much. But again, it's getting Momoa a lot of talk, whether some good, some bad. But it's making people wanting to see the movie all the more because like, holy shit, like he's a version of the Joker in the Fast and Furious movies. Cool.
Yeah, I was about to say, it sounds like he is Joker, to Dom Toretto's Batman.
Essentially, yes. And with that, I'm curious to see what else is going to happen now that they have 2 more films to fill it out. Because apparently they're introducing more characters in the last 2 films. I don't know how many more characters you can introduce at this point. But it's just nonstop. Like, it's weird. Like, it's one thing to read it online, because even I read some stuff before I watched the film. But then watching it play out on screen, I'm like, holy shit, what the fuck are they doing? But then again, the Fast movies kind of like march to the beat of their own drum anyway, so.
Yeah, that's a good point.
So when
at this point, we already, and the other thing too is we know, I mean, if you look at like the franchise as a whole, it has made like a ridiculous amount of money. And I think a lot of that money, I want to say more than half of it actually came from the overseas releases. Because
yes.
Those monies, when those come out in like China and Japan and parts of Southeast Asia and all over Europe and Eastern Europe and stuff like that, you print money, man. Just people are just like losing their minds, like being like, we got to go see this.
Well, in particular, the one you mentioned before, Fast 9, being that it got pushed back here in the States, when they finally did the opening overseas, they made it a big event, like a big gala event where everybody was just showing up for this premiere. And yeah, it just opened up huge overseas. So for them, they know where their market is. They know where they're getting their ticket sales from, and they're just playing it up as much as they can at this point. They have no problem with it, and people love it. Somehow, even though people talk about hero fatigue with the Marvel movies and the DC movies, somehow the Fast movies are still going strong.
Oh yeah.
So whether you want to chalk it up to any kind of fatigue in any one genre whatsoever, I know that after a while, like once a movie genre hits and then after a while it starts to get watered down. In particular, Marvel movies, Fast movies, they're still going strong. It makes sense that they're not going to close it out fully. Yes, you're going to have the end to the Fast saga, I'm sure they're calling it at this point, because even Vin Diesel at this point puts it on par with like Lord of the Rings, which is just an absurd comparison. But look what he's done so far. It's kind of hard to like not at the very least talk about it in the same breath in some regard. Not saying that it is greater than Lord of the Rings. But
no, I think that would be a little. I think that would be a little much.
Yeah, no. But I'm saying like the fact that they're able to weave this story, and it's not like they thought about where the story currently is to where the story initially started. Nobody foresaw this happening. They made it up as they went along, and they've weaved this weird story together that you're just like, huh, a bunch of car thieves, a bunch of drag racers eventually end up at this point, and just it's gotten more and more ridiculous. Whether there's backfighting behind the scenes or fights with directors, I believe Justin Lin at one point left because he just couldn't take all the nonsense and chaos anymore. He says that no movie's worth my mental health. That's why he left, and they had to switch out with Louis Leterrier.
Yeah.
And even Leterrier at one point was saying that I think they got a little too far in the previous movies. What I bring to the Fast and Furious franchise is grounding of the story. If you watch Fast X, and I'm looking forward to when you do watch it, because I want to know how you feel about some of the scenes. It's still nuts and crazy, and anything that they could do with their hands or legs as far as fighting, they use the cars as extensions of their own bodies. It's just absolutely weird, and I don't know. I look forward to talking to you about it when you get a chance.
No, I'm meaning to watch it. I know it's already available on like some streaming services for a premium price, so I'll probably be catching up with it. I'm hoping like in the next couple of weeks, when I have some downtime, I can catch up on that. But I'm working on it.
If you can find any theater around you that's still playing it, see if you can find. I know the Manville Theater by us on Tuesday nights does like half nights for movies still running.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know if you have a theater around you that also runs a similar type of deal. But that's always a good way to try to check it out.
It's actually funny. I've outside of the drive-in, I'm trying to think here. Since I moved to this area 4 years ago, I have been to the movie theaters in this area exactly once. No, wait a minute. No, that's not right. No, I've gone a couple of times.
Okay.
I've gone 3 times. Yeah, because I went to go see the new Doctor Strange and Thor last summer. And then right around Thanksgiving of 2021, I went to go see the new Ghostbusters.
That was a
But
good
that's
one,
pretty
too.
much in it. Yeah. What's up?
Ghostbusters, that was a fun one, too. And they're working on the next one for that one as well.
Yeah, I saw Kumail Nanjiani, star of Eternals, and all-around awesome comedian, although I've kind of fallen out of favor with the guy as much these days. But, well, I mean, I don't know, like a lot of the stuff he's been working on, I was like, that's not for me. But yeah, he tweeted something that was kind of a teaser for it, so I was like, ooh, if he's in it, I'm interested. And,
Who knows? Maybe he'll go back to being a little bit more comedic. Some of his other roles have been a little bit different sometimes.
yeah, I don't know. And you know what, though, I can't, good for him. He's making this money because I remember when he was just a comedian who was just, just constantly on tour and running this events and, taking like, the nerd melts, or, the one nerd thing he was doing with Jonah Ray on the road like 8 years ago, 9 years ago. So, hey, good for him. If he's going to make some serious money, fucking good for him. So.
All right. I think we've covered quite a bit of different subjects tonight.
Mm-hmm.
Movies, a little bit of music in there with Prince, a little comic books as well. Yeah, I think we've got our fill.
I was gonna say, yeah, we've been recording about an hour and a half or so, and it's coming up on 11 p.m. So yeah, us old men need to go get some sleep.
There you go. Well, sir, I appreciate you giving me your time. Let's wrap this one up. For anybody listening, I hope you enjoyed our crazy all over the board discussion, and we hope to bring you some more. So thank you for listening, and we are the Rabblecast.